SME comes preloaded with the default warehouse, which you can rename. Sometimes people want to keep track of stock in multiple warehouses. Another warehouse could be a truck or a van inventory, or maybe you have another physical warehouse you want to track stock in besides just the main default warehouse. So you need to set those warehouses up in the Setup module under Company and go to the List section and locate warehouses. Now in this demo database, we already have a bunch of warehouses already set up. The one that's called default, that's the main warehouse that was automatically created when you installed SME. You can always rename it if you need to, but the default warehouse is checked on it. Now let's add another warehouse. Maybe we already have some for some vans, but let's go ahead and add another one. So I'm going to click New at the bottom, and in this window I'm going to call this, or maybe I'll just call it a truck number, truck 45. Now I'm not going to check default warehouse. That's going to be designated on the main warehouse. But at the bottom, notice there's a shipping address section. This would be filled out if you're ever going to place a purchase order and have it shipped to this warehouse rather than to your default warehouse. So maybe it doesn't make sense to have a shipment go to a truck, but if it's another physical warehouse, you can put in that address down at the bottom. Now the customer checkbox at the top, most likely you're not going to be checking that. If that is checked, then you can only reserve stock from this warehouse for customers that have this warehouse assigned to them. So if you have stock you're holding in your warehouses only for a specific customer, other customers cannot reserve stock from it, then you could set it up as a customer warehouse. You need to make sure then you assign that warehouse to the customer record in the location field. So let's go ahead and just add that truck. Now other warehouses like this one, maybe this is or maybe Eastside. Eastside might be a warehouse that we sometimes place POs for. So let's edit that and make sure there's an address on it. So down at the bottom, let's just go ahead and put an address on this. And we could put a contact on there too. Now, when I'll show you how when we create a PO, you can choose that warehouse as a shipment warehouse. Now we've created truck 45 warehouse. Now we can add stock to it, transfer stock to it, or even place a PO for it. Let's first go to an inventory item. So we're on this item for pool pump. If we look at the stock tab, we have stock in Bob's van. It's a quantity of 1. Now, you can add stock directly to this if you want. Typically, when you're adding stock, you're going to be placing POs and receiving those POs in. I'm just going to actually manually add stock by clicking New Stock Location here. And I'm going to choose Marvin's van. Oh no, sorry, it's not Marvin's van. It was truck 45. And let's add a quantity of 5 of these. Now, if you're going to add stock this way, it doesn't create a GL entry to QuickBooks, and it doesn't actually add stock to your inventory item in QuickBooks. So typically, you're going to be placing a PO to receive items in and to increase your stock. So now I have this entry here for truck stock for a quantity of 5. Now, if I wanted to actually place a PO and have that PO shipped to the east side, which is a different warehouse, let's go down to a PO, and I'm going to just click New and create a new purchase order. And on the shipping tab on the left, I'm going to change the ship to east side. So when we did that, notice it put in the Sally Jones name and that address we put on the east side warehouse. So now when we go ahead and add items to this PO, let's just add a couple items here real quick. And let's add another one. And click OK. So when we actually receive these items in on this PO, the stock is going to go to this east side location. It's not going to be received into the default warehouse, but instead to this east side. So let's go ahead and receive this item in. I'll just receive this first one. And let's go take a look at that inventory item so you can see how it brought that inventory into the east side warehouse. So I'm just going to right click on that item on the PO and jump to inventory. We know that item came in, the on-hand number is 1. Let's go to the stock tab and you can see that stock came in to the east side location, not the default warehouse, but the east side location. So when you set up different warehouses, you could assign an address to them and you can use those warehouses as the ship to location and the stock would be received into that warehouse selected. Another thing you can do when you're starting to set up these different warehouse locations is to add a minimum quantity required in the various locations on inventory items. So for this particular item on the east side warehouse, I want to have a minimum of 3. So if I go ahead and edit this, it brings open the inventory stock editor and I can put the minimum quantity in here. So I'll click OK. Maybe I also want to have a minimum quantity for truck 25 or whatever it was. So I would have to add another entry. I'd add a new stock location for truck 25. 45. I'm not adding any stock in, so let me change this add quantity to 0. I'll click OK. Once that stock lot or that stock location has been created for this item, I can then edit it and put in a minimum quantity. So for this one, I always want 2 in that particular warehouse location. So if we go to another inventory item, we can do the same thing. We can, let's find one that has some stock. So for this one, this is a default warehouse. I'm going to edit that stock lot on this particular inventory item, and I can put a minimum on this. So I want 17 of these on in the main warehouse, and maybe I also want to have in our east side warehouse, I want to have, sorry, here it is. I'm not adding stock, but I want to add a minimum quantity. So I'm going to now edit that stock lot that stock detail I just created and put in a minimum quantity of 5. You can see there's a column toward the right that says minimum level. So I can tell this one has a minimum of 5 and this one has 17. So now that you set up minimum levels on various warehouse locations for inventory items, you can either use this tool at the top for creating POs by locations, or you can run a report as well and see the items that are below minimum at the various locations. So if we go under Reports module, there's a Print Report section, and let's go to Inventory, and here's a standard inventory warehouse below minimum. So let's look at what we have in the east side warehouse that's below that minimum level. So I'm just going to click Print, and these are the 2 items we were just looking at. So in this particular warehouse, the east side warehouse, we have a minimum level of 5, and these are our on-hand quantities, so it's showing us the difference. Also, if you want to run a report to see what's available in the various warehouses that you have set up, you can. There's a report, standard inventory currently available, and you could go ahead and filter by the various location warehouses. So I want to look at what's available in truck 45. Actually, do I have anything? Okay, it's just one. So we can see there's a pool pump in truck 45, and there's 5 available. Another thing that you can do with these multiple warehouse locations you've created is to assign them to technicians. So if we go under a technician user in SME, go to the technician settings tab, there's a warehouse field here. This is where you can assign a warehouse to a technician. This comes into play when you're using the mobile tech application. And there's settings in the mobile tech which allow the technician to only see stock in their truck or their warehouse and allocate stock from their truck. So it's a way to assign a warehouse to a technician.